Hello, sea lions and dolphins. Great to see you here again today. So it's time for literacy on the Tuesday for this week. We are doing similes today. So something we've worked on already in school, but something that we've not done a load of work on because obviously it's quite advanced work. So it would be really great to have you all here so you can all have a practice. Even if you feel like you're pretty good at them, there's a lot of subtleties to similes, and practice is always really handy for them, and they can be really effective in your writing as well when you're trying to describe. So a really helpful tool to have in your pocket. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to go through an active inspired just like we have in previous lessons, but also like we do in school. And then I'll talk to you about your task at the end. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So lesson objective today, to use similes in a sentence to describe the Iron Man. So we're still talking about the Iron Man, we're still talking about chapter 1, though we are going to move on to chapter 2 very soon. So the good thing is you'll have some more Iron Man to read, some more Iron Man to digest soon. This is pretty much our last lesson on chapter 1 now. So it'd be nice to move on, do something new. So it says on this next page, we've got a sort of poster here, picture that tells us about similes. Similes are a comparison between two things using as or like. So you can use either. Neither is better. You've just got to decide which one makes the most sense for your sentence. But using as or like is equally good as long as it makes sense. It's up to you which one you want to use. But we would, in your work today, like to see a variety. So even 5 of each would be great. But if you did 6 of one and 4 of the other, that's obviously absolutely fine as well. So in this example, they're comparing this girl to the sun in different ways. So there's 2 sentences at the bottom. One says her smile is as bright as the sun, and one says her smile is bright like the sun. Both are good sentences. One uses as and like. Neither are better than the other. It's which do you think fits in your writing best at that time, or which one fits into the sentence best at that time. So don't worry too much about which one you're using for each sentence. Just make sure you're using both as it goes on. So a simile is a figure of speech that directly compares two things. They're a bit like metaphors, but we use like or as. So remember, you're comparing one thing to another. So you have to think, when you're composing your sentences, you need to think, well, what am I going to compare and what am I going to compare it to? So we're talking about the Iron Man. So you're going to compare his head to something, his eyes, his arms, his legs, his body, the way he moves. What are you going to compare first? So think about that first, and then think, what in the world that I know could it be compared to that particular part I picked? I picked his eyes. What could I compare those to? So I'll look at some examples on the next couple of pages. So on one side, we've got what characteristics does the Iron Man have? So the characteristics are what's something like to look at and how does it behave. There its characteristics. So like I said on the previous page, this is now talking about what the Iron Man's like, and on the right it's got what could we compare them to. So I've written 5 very short sentences. Also, they're not very good sentences. They haven't got any conjunctions and things like that. But the idea of these is just to give you some examples for you to use in your bigger, better sentences. Now, on the left, we've got 5 things the Iron Man has. He has red eyes, he has strong arms, he has long legs, he has huge feet, and he has a shiny head. So there are 5 things the Iron Man has. There are 5 characteristics of his. And on the right, we have 5 things we could compare them to. So like tree trunks, as polished as glass, like laser beams, like skyscrapers, and as big as a flying saucer, or as big as flying saucers, I should say. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this, or you can pause the video. So I'll pause anyway, but if you want to pause the video to give yourself a bit more time, what I want you to do is I want you to link the sentence on the left, or the part of the sentence on the left, the characteristic, to the comparison on the right, and then I will go through them in a moment. So either pause the video now, or I'll give you 15-20 seconds now to do your work. So just think which one makes the most sense with which. There's a mix of as and likes. Often when you're doing this kind of thing, I find it's best to think well, which one makes the most sense if I say it, rather than trying to link them together, just say them together. So red eyes as polished as glass, red eyes like skyscrapers. Which one makes the most sense? I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, so let's carry on. So actually, there are different answers to some of these, because some of these work with multiple characteristics. So I'll tell you the sentences I had lined up. But as I say, there are some that would make sense in different situations. So red eyes. So red eyes like laser beams. That was the combo for me. Like I said, you could have polished glass red eyes. That's certainly possible. As big as flying saucers, he could have big flying saucer eyes, couldn't he? So there are multiple ones that make sense, but I like the laser beam and the red combination. Strong arms. So the strong arms I had like skyscrapers, or like tree trunks, and both work really well. But I want you to think which one makes the most sense, because they both work. They're both good examples, aren't they? They both give you the impression of something really big, really, you know, really wide and really long, like the Iron Man's arms would be. But which one makes the most sense? So I'm going to say you could use either of them. So you're right if you've used either of those. But I personally would use like skyscrapers, because I think skyscrapers are really strong. They're all made out of concrete and brick and metal, and they're all big and strong. And so that gives that strong impression. You know, strong arms like skyscrapers. You can imagine if something had arms as big and strong as skyscrapers, they would be really strong when they're really big. So I like that comparison, but either works quite well. Long legs like tree trunks. I like that one because obviously tree trunks are generally very long. They're much longer generally than the body of the tree. And therefore it kind of makes sense because most people's legs are longer than their body. So it kind of makes sense in that way. Huge feet. I've got as big as flying saucers, because I imagine that the Iron Man's feet are round. Now, I don't know whether it's actually told us whether he's got round feet, so you don't have to agree with that. You can make your own sentence up, but I like the idea that he's got big round feet with maybe little bits just coming off. So a big round foot like that, and then little bits just coming off like little toes, but he's got round feet. So as big as flying saucers. And finally, a shiny head as polished as glass. So he's got a really shiny, smooth head, and like the sun's light reflects off his head. So they're the examples I put together. Now, obviously, we're going to go on to your work in a minute, but we'd expect, obviously, complete sentences. The idea of this exercise was just to compare a characteristic with something to compare it to. But on the next slide, we'll move on to complete sentences with everything we'd like to see in your work. So time to make some sentences. So these are complete sentences, and they have a few characteristics each that are really important. They all have a full stop, because even though we're not all together, it's really important we remember these things. Otherwise, when you come back to school, you'll have got out the habit. So make sure you're putting these vital things in. So they've each got a capital letter and a full stop. So we want to see that in all of your writing today, capital letters and full stops. Now, we've also got good length sentences, haven't we? And although some have got conjunctions, it's not necessarily needed to have a conjunction to have a good length sentence when you're using similes, but conjunctions would be a really good thing to put in. So things like because, so, if, however, they'd be really good to extend your sentences. The key thing is we're looking at similes today, aren't we? And we always like to focus in on the key thing we're talking about, not necessarily try and cram everything from literacy in one go, although it's great to get those other features in like conjunctions. The most important thing is to make sure our sentence makes sense. We have a capital letter, full stop, and we have our simile. So the first one is the Iron Man had a head that shined as bright as the sun as it set over the horizon. So the simile is shined as bright as the sun. So the actual as here is my conjunction. that extends the sentence, because I could have ended it there, couldn't I? The Iron Man had a head that shines bright as the sun, full stop. But I thought it's better to add a bit more detail. So as it's set over the horizon. So what's nice about that is it describes the Iron Man and it's using a simile, but also it tells you what kind of day it is. It's as the sun's setting over the horizon. So it kind of gives you lots of information there. It's very descriptive. The legs of the Iron Man march forward like gigantic tree trunks from an ancient oak. Again, we've extended that sentence, haven't we? The legs of the Iron Man march forward like gigantic tree trunks. Full stop, could have ended it there. But instead, from an ancient oak tree. So it just adds, again, more detail, more feeling, more atmosphere to the story. So the legs of the Iron Man march forward like gigantic tree trunks. That is our simile, because you're comparing his legs to gigantic tree trunks, just as we previously compared his head to the sun. Finally, his eyes blazed like fire as the Iron Man scanned the horizon. So his eyes blazed like fire. So again, we could have ended the sentence at blazed like fire, but as the Iron Man scanned the horizon, it just gets a bit more information on that sentence. We know his eyes are blazing like fire as he looks over the horizon. So those are some example sentences. Now, while you're doing your work today, which I'll come on to in a second, feel free to go to this part of the teach and pause the video. Then you can have these examples in front of you to help you a little bit. Or even feel free to, go back to this poster and keep this poster in front of you. So it's up to you which bit you'd like to keep. Right, finally, it's time for you to have a go. So you need to remember, you need to compare something about the Iron Man with something else using like or as. You need to write 10 sentences. Each has to have a simile in it. And we'd love to see some of those other features. The key thing is it has a simile in it and then it's a sentence, i.e. it has a capital letter and full stop. Those are the key things. But if you can get conjunctions in, if you can get an adverb in or extra adjectives in or an expanded noun phrase in, that's obviously fantastic and we love to see that. And as it says at the bottom, try using conjunctions to extend your sentences. So I hope all that makes sense. You have 10 sentences to write today. So I'd also say you have a lot of time to make this really, really good. It's not a load to write. You write more than that in school generally. Sometimes we'll aim for that kind of amount. So you have plenty of time to do this. You have plenty of time to do really well. So let's make these some great sentences. So you have about 10 sentences to do. Shouldn't take too long. So make them really, really good. Best handwriting. And I hope you do really well. Obviously, as ever, if you need anything, please email us. Or if you want to show off your amazing work, please email us as well. Enjoy your literacy year 4, and I will talk to you for maths and later in the day.